So today we're going to talk about automatic translation. So of course I mean tools such as Google Translate, but we will also look at another tool called DeepL, which actually is a competitor to Google Translate, and in many cases the translations are superior. Not always, but we will look at some examples and we'll see that in many cases that tool might actually be better. But we will also talk about the shortcomings of such tools and the fact that you cannot completely rely on such translations. And I'm sure you're aware of that, but we will have some fun with different sentences and different expressions and see where those tools have issues and where they actually do a pretty good job. So we're going to be working with a document, a file, that contains some sentences. So it would be good if you actually downloaded that file and worked with it on your own so that you can copy and paste the sentences and also do an exercise that file contains. So you need to go to activities and you've got this file, lexical contrast. Actually, there's a spelling mistake here. It should be lexical contrast 18 to 25. So if you download that file, you will get something like this. Right, so we will start with this exercise to see some lexical issues where we have to decide which word to use in English. So which word would be an equivalent of a Polish word, basically. And then we will have some sentences that we will actually paste into the translators. But first you need to do this exercise. So I can't display the whole exercise here unless I make it very small. So you should download the file and do this exercise. So just do these sentences. In each case you have to decide which English word would be the right word to complete each sentence. So which word would be the equivalent of the Polish word in this given sentence, right? So as an example, akcja przeciw czemuś, right? So what's the English equivalent? Action or campaign, right? So go over these sentences and make your choices in each case. Pause the video and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so akcja, action or campaign? What do you think about their campaign against drunk driving? So of course this is the kind of akcja that is meant here. This organized activity with a certain goal, for something or against something. And of course that can easily be checked in a dictionary. Elektryczny, electric or electrical? How is electrical energy produced? Right? So of course we might just know, but if we don't, how do we decide? if we look up electric, we can see the definition. Connected with electricity using, produced by, or producing electricity. Electric car, electric guitar, electric current, electric motor, electric power, right? So what about electrical then? Connected with electricity, using or producing electricity. So the definition is very similar. But you can look at the collocations here. Electrical equipment, electrical appliances. And these are in a bold font. So that means they are collocations, they are common phrases. Electrical power, electrical energy. So we've got this collocation. So the difference is largely that of collocation, right? So electrical collocates with other words than electric because there isn't much difference in the meaning. However, with many of these, the difference will be largely in meaning or in context. And that's also when those automatic translators will sometimes have problems. Okay, so epocha, age or epoch. Why is this time called the Iron Age, Daddy? Right? So you have the Iron Age, the Stone Age, the Ice Age. Fantasia. Imagination or fantasy. He may be lazy, but he doesn't lack imagination. Nie brak mu fantazji, right? So the Polish word fantazja has this one meaning which actually means imagination. Of course, the English word fantasy doesn't have that meaning. Humor, humor or mood. She's been in a very good mood since morning, obviously. Intensywny, intense or intensive. Are you really going to take an intensive course in computer programming? Klasyczny, classic or classical. Again, a similar situation to electric and electrical. The current crisis is a classic example of a power struggle, right? But you have classical music. Klienci, clients or customers. The little grocery on the corner has lost a lot of customers. Magiczny, magic or magical. I don't really believe in magical powers, right? And again, this will largely be a question of collocations. Okazja, bargain or occasion. At $14.99, these leather shoes are a real bargain, right? When we talk about something cheap, yeah, or something of good quality that has a reasonable price. So fałszywy, fake or false. Someone has been passing fake $100 bills all over town again. Możliwość, opportunity or possibility. I've never had the opportunity to see Coldplay in a live concert, right? So it's more like okazja, actually. Nie miałem okazji, rather than możliwość. Parking, car park or parking. It is a huge shopping center and it has a multi-story car park, right? So parking is an uncountable noun which generally refers to just the possibility of parking or an area where you can park, but it's more abstract than a car park. Car park is the actual place and it's countable. a car park, right? In American English, a parking lot. But of course, you can say, I'm looking for parking, which just means I'm looking for some place to park. Pasować, fit or suit. These jeans fit like a glove. So of course, when we talk about size, that something is the right size, we use fit. Różny, different or various. My sons have different tastes in music and girls. So of course, different because they differ from each other. But of course, different and various can be used interchangeably in many contexts when we talk about a variety of things, right? Like I have different interests, or I have various interests. Siła, force or strength. Your sister is a famous opera singer. What do you think is her greatest strength? It's like mocna strona, something like that. So siła is perhaps not the best word in this context. But we also have a translation of this word. So it can also be translated as power or strength. So she has a strange power over her husband. He twitches whenever she looks at him. Right? So to have power over somebody. Uczyć się, learn or study. Don't disturb him. He is studying for tomorrow's chemistry test. Right? Not learning. He's learning Spanish. So if he's learning something specific, or he's learning to ski, for example. Zauważyć, notice or remark. So of course the difference is huge because in English these words mean something quite different. But in Polish, zauważyć can be used in these two meanings. So, did you notice how pale she was today? Fałszywy, again, false or fake. Do you think celebrities travel under false names? Right. Możliwość, opportunity or possibility. Is there any possibility that your parents will come earlier? Różny again, different or various. Since they retired, they have traveled to various countries all over the world. And using different wouldn't be an error here. Although usually when we talk about a variety of places or things, we prefer to use various. Scena, scene or stage. She makes a scene whenever he's late from work. So of course this is an idiomatic expression, to make a scene. And we have a similar one in Polish. Robić scenę, robić sceny. So that's of course scene. Siła, force or strength. The villagers were driven out of their houses by force. By force, that's the expression, in the middle of the night. Sztuczny, again, artificial or false. I can't get used to my new false teeth. They keep giving me awful pains in the gums. Zauważyć again, notice or remark. I wonder if he will remark reproachfully that I am late as usual. So, remark here means to say something in a certain way. Okay, so let's look at some sentences which we will paste into Google and DeepL. So let's look at those tools. So we've got Google Translate, which you all know and love, and we've also got the DeepL translator. So if you haven't used this one, you might give it a try. We will compare some examples. But first, let me type in a short sentence or 2 sentences. Right, so you can see the problem. That's an idiomatic expression. And of course, Google Translate is not able to recognize that. Of course, the problem with automatic translation is that you need context to correctly process many sentences, right? So of course you can imagine a context in which this would actually have this literal meaning, right? So let's say we are in the bathroom with somebody and somebody's pouring the water. So we tell them to stop pouring the water. Przestań lać wodę. Right? But of course, we have this context here, right? So Google doesn't recognize this context here, which doesn't mean that it never recognizes context, because in many cases, I'm not sure about the context of another sentence, but within the same sentence, context definitely works here, because we will see that when we change things in the sentence, when we add some words, then the translation changes. But that may be because it just recognizes or finds another example in the database of a whole sentence which is translated and just replaces it, right? So I don't know the exact workings of Google Translate, so how it actually works, but I think that it has a huge database of translations, so it's a little like a translation memory, actually. Maybe a little more intelligent, and it tries to find similar phrases, similar sentences for a given sentence or a given phrase. But as far as I can see, it doesn't necessarily work across sentences. So adding another sentence doesn't seem to change the translation. So it doesn't take that context into account. So probably it doesn't go beyond the sentence level. That's what I want to say. But that's theoretical. Let's see. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And we can see that we have the same problem in DeepL. So it's not any wiser here. Okay, so let's work with individual sentences. I have quite a few sentences here, and they contain words from that exercise we've just done. Okay, so let's have some fun with these sentences. Weź udział w akcji na rzecz osób niepełnosprawnych. So we have this word akcja. Let's start with Google. Take part in the action for the disabled. So you can see that this is not translated correctly. However, DeepL gives us a correct translation, right? So you can see that in this case, it's superior. Epoka żelaza. So there shouldn't be a problem with this kind of phrase because it's a common phrase, common collocation. so it just needs to find it in the database. Muszę przyznać, że nie brak ci fantazji. Right, so again, we can see a problem. I have to admit that you do not lack fantasy, right? So that means that this phrase, because this is a relatively common phrase, but it's not in the database. And so Google just translates this word literally, because this is the most common translation of the word. And DeepL has the same problem. So the translation is basically the same, except that we have this comma, which shouldn't really be here. Okay, I don't predict any problems with this one, because it's such a common expression. Let's look at this one. Right, and this is a very good translation. Excellent. There is no shortage of intense sensations here. Very nice. And the same here. It's the exact same translation. This is a classic example. So this is the phrase we're interested in, or the word that we're interested in. Classic example, no problem with that. Lack of competence. Okay, and DeepL actually has a slightly more elegant translation, a classic example of incompetence. Right, because we have this word which is commonly used. Okay. So no problem with that. And the same here. So now we're going to change one word. Ten adwokat nie ma wielu klientów. And we can see that Google copes with this without problems. And the same goes for DeepL. Right, nie wierzę w magiczne siły. Let's try this one. And that's quite an intelligent translation. I don't believe in magic. In magical forces, magical powers. You can see sometimes it's amusing how changing even a punctuation mark changes the translation. The same happens in Google. Of course, this is not correct, but maybe it's expecting something here and it doesn't quite know what to do with this. But when you indicate that this is over, this is the end of the sentence, then it knows that this is the phrase to look for, I assume. But it's really interesting how when you change the punctuation or a few letters, even those translations will change. So let's change that to zaklęcia. Magic spells. The same here. Okay, to prawdziwa okazja. I don't expect any problems here, right? because this is such a common phrase and it's obvious what it means. Okay, well, it's not that obvious because, of course, depending on the context, this sentence could mean or it could refer to a product that is at a very good price, for example. And that's what probably comes to mind when you look at the sentence, right? If you say prawdziwa okazja, that's what you mean. In other contexts, you wouldn't say prawdziwa okazja. You would say, of course, you would use the word okazja, but nie przegap tej okazji, right? For example, don't miss this opportunity. Yes, but if you say to prawdziwa okazja, you normally mean something that you can buy, I think. So this, and of course we have these alternatives here, right? So we've got this correct translation here. But Google just gives us the one that's most likely. To są fałszywe banknoty. These are fake banknotes. Okay. These are counterfeit notes. Okay, so these are, this is an adjective that means basically podrobiony, right? So yeah, so the meaning is in this context is basically the same. So we've got fake bills, fake notes. Bills is American English. Counterfeit bills, right? And also this translation of banknoty as banknotes. Here it's just notes, and that's actually more accurate because that's what you call the paper money normally, right? So a £10 note, for example, you don't normally say banknote. And I actually think that banknote might have a slightly, no, it doesn't have a different meaning, but it's yeah, so the American English is bill, note, so it's basically the same. I thought there was some difference, but not really. Okay, so to są fałszywe informacje. This is false information. Of course, we have the singular because this is uncountable. Yes, so let's see what DeepL tells us. This is false information. Unless by informacje we mean news, because that's also how informacje can be translated. Najnowsze informacje, the latest news. So let's try wiadomości. These are fake messages. Okay, so again, you can see how context dictates everything. Because when you hear this sentence, or when you look at this sentence, to są fałszywe wiadomości. So what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Well, it will depend on the context, but it might refer to the news, right? Not necessarily messages. But of course, messages are also wiadomości. So a different type of wiadomości. So let's see what... These are fake messages. These are false messages. Okay. So let's try something else. Let's switch between English and Polish. and let's type "this is fake news." And you can see that actually the translation is the same, except the verb has been left out. But that's interesting, right? Because if I now switch back, so actually now this is translated as fake news, but that's what I was talking about. You can add something like a verb. To są oczywiście. Right. So what's the difference? Right? There is no difference in meaning here, but these two sentences are translated differently because probably in the database there is a translation of this exact sentence. And there is also another translation of this exact sentence without the verb, and this is translated differently. Right? So it's just a collection of phrases and sentences that it uses. That's my understanding. And of course, as the system gets better, so there are more and more examples, of course, those translations get better. I remember that a few years ago, those Google translations were really much worse. Some of them were just ridiculous. So they are getting better, but still, you can see that depending on the actual wording, the actual phrasing, you may get different results. And of course, it all depends on the context. And Google doesn't know the context, right? Neither does DeepL. So let me switch. Okay, so we've got fake news, right? And you can see that the same thing happens, funnily enough. Okay, so let's continue. Darmowy parking. Free parking. Okay. But właściciel darmowego parkingu. Free car park owner. The owner of a free car park. So now darmowy parking is free car park, right? Because this refers to this specific place or specific object or area. So that's why we have car park here. Whereas when we say darmowy parking, we are not necessarily referring to a specific area. We are just looking for a possibility to park free of charge, right? Ok, te jeansy pasują idealnie. These jeans fit perfectly. The same translation here. Or, and this is actually better, these jeans are a perfect fit. Te kolory nie pasują do siebie. So now we've got colors. These colors do not match of course, right? Because that's a different kind of pasować. Czy ten termin ci pasuje? So we have the verb pasować in a different meaning still. Does this date suit you? Right. Date, right? Not term. Right, so that's actually... So you can see that in some cases, Google Translate does a better job. Although I think on average, DeepL tends to have slightly better translations, but this is changing all the time because, as I said, Google Translate is improving. So at a given moment, it's hard to say which one is better. Moje córki mają różne gusta. My daughters have different tastes. That's right. Oops. I copied that. Right. Mam różne zainteresowania. I have different interests. I have different interests, but it offers you those alternatives. I have various interests. I've got different interests. What are its strengths? Right. Why its? Because yay could refer to anything. It could be a feminine noun. Well, it does refer to a feminine noun, but it could be an object, right? For example, jej could refer to praca, for example. So, as I said, you need context, right? So let's see if we add another sentence which will clarify the context. I don't think it will change this this translation, but let's check it out. So right, so you can see that it doesn't affect the translation. We have the context, but of course that would require an analysis of the actual meaning, and those translators don't really use AI, artificial intelligence. Maybe they do to a certain degree, but they don't really process the meaning. That's my impression. So they rely on databases of phrases and sentences, but they do not see the context. Well, wasn't I wrong? So let's try without this. So you can see that without this first sentence, we've got its, right? And with the previous sentence, this is changed to her. So at this point, you can see that DeepL actually uses some analysis of the meaning, because it's hard to imagine that it actually has these two sentences together in the database. It has to do some kind of analysis, right? So you can see that at this point, it is superior to Google Translate. Let's look at a few more examples. Okay, so no problem here. Siła przekonań. The power of belief. Right. Nie używaj siły. Don't use force. Don't use force. Nie używaj całej siły. Don't use all your strength. I hope you can see the difference. Nie używaj siły would refer to using force, like using violence, right? Whereas if you say nie używaj całej siły, you're talking about physical strength to carry out a task, to carry something, to lift something, to push something. Right, so let's try here. Okay, so the same here. Uczę się do testu. I'm studying for the test. I'm studying for the test. Uczę się japońskiego. I'm learning Japanese. I'm learning Japanese. I'm studying Japanese is also possible. But if we say uczę się żonglować, I'm learning to juggle. Because with the infinitive, we need to use learn. Zauważył, że nie ma wody. Right, he noticed that there was no water. So that's the most obvious translation. He noticed there was no water. Pragnę zauważyć, że nie ma już wody. So here, of course, zauważyć has a totally different meaning. And no problem here. I would like to point out there is no more water. Obviously, this phrase is pretty common. So, right, same translation. Sztuczny uśmiech. Fake smile. Sztuczne zęby. Artificial teeth, and it has this icon here, which would imply that this is somehow verified or confirmed. But that's not what we call sztuczne zęby. Because if I use Google, regular Google, and I type in artificial teeth, right, you will see that you've got a few results with artificial teeth, but and perhaps that's used as well, but you've got results with false teeth. And I think this is the common expression. Another common expression is dentures. Anyway, DeepL DeepL gives us this word. And that's odd, because that's something quite different. Right, on a fork, for example. She's got artificial teeth. She's got fake teeth. So I think artificial teeth might actually be used looking at the Google results. But if you look at the Wikipedia page, dentures, also known as false teeth. This is the commonly used term. Dentures are false teeth. Artificial teeth is not really, I mean, maybe some people use it, but I'm surprised that such a common term is mistranslated, especially by DeepL. Uwaga. Warning, or caution, or attention, right? Attention. Czytaj z uwagą. Read carefully. Read it carefully. Takie uwagi są nie na miejscu. Such comments are out of place. Correct. Such remarks are out of place. So both these translations are acceptable. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this point. I think the most valuable lesson here was when we reached that example where Google Translate did not recognize the context. So adding another sentence did not change the translation, but in DeepL it did. So that's something worth exploring. So I'll try to look for some more examples and see to what extent DeepL is more intelligent than Google Translate.